I discovered this channel, PragerU, and it's just full of shit to pull apart. So here's another one of their videos. Why is there suffering or some nonsense like that?
Many people have claimed that such suffering is a proof that God does not exist. Their argument goes like this. God is all good and all powerful. Such a God would not permit unnecessary suffering, yet we constantly observe unjust suffering. Therefore, at least one of the premises about God must be false. Either God is not all good, or he is not all powerful, or he just doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's a good summary of a deductive argument. Just to be clear, a deductive argument has premises and a conclusion. If the premises are sound, the conclusion necessarily follows. It's an airtight argument. For example, premise 1, all men are mortal. Premise 2, Plato is a man. Conclusion, Plato is mortal. If all men are mortal, and Plato is a man, logic dictates that Plato is mortal. Airtight.
What's wrong with this argument?
Nothing.
First, let's examine what we mean when we say that God would not permit unjust suffering. There are two categories of suffering. Suffering caused by human beings, which we call moral evils, and suffering caused by nature, for instance, earthquakes or cancer. Free will explains how God could be good and allow moral evil.
Oh, here we go again. Explaining moral evil by saying that we wouldn't have free will if we were all good. Doesn't that mean that God doesn't have free will, since you're saying he's the ultimate good? And what about heaven? Do we lose our free will when we get to heaven? Because there's no evil in heaven, right?
Because God has given people free will, they are free to behave against God's will. The fact that they do evil does not prove that God is not good.
Who says that God is ultimately good? You're making a moral judgment about God. How are you making that judgment if God is the arbiter of what's good and bad? God could be ultimately bad, but say he's good. And by your logic, he would still be good. You're making a moral judgment about your own moral compass. You've created a little paradox for yourself with this argument.
In addition, if there were no God, there would be no absolute standard of good. Every judgment presupposes a standard. And that's true of our moral judgments too. What is our standard for judging evil to be evil? The most we could say about evil, if there were no God, was that we, in our subjective tastes, didn't like it when people did certain things to other people.
Sure, and I'd say that's how it started. We have a biological drive to protect our children and ourselves. The fact that we're driven to protect our children created the need for empathy. We can imagine ourselves in the place of the person being affected. We don't want to be hurt, and we don't want other people to be hurt. A mirror neuron is a neuron that fires both when a person acts and when the person observes the same action performed by another. We see it in animals too. The example we had in one of my psychology classes was somebody taking a mannequin head and putting grapes in for eyes, then cutting across the grapes with a razor. It made us cringe. That was our mirror neurons building models in our brain of that happening to us, even though it was inanimate.
We wouldn't have a basis for saying an act was bad, only that we didn't like it. So the problem of human evil exists only if God exists.
Our basis for saying something is evil is whether or not we would want it done to ourselves. That is the basis of all morality, empathy.
As for natural suffering, that poses what appears to be a more difficult question.
No shit.
We see an innocent child suffer, say, from an incurable disease. We complain. Understandable. We don't like it. Understandable. We feel it is wrong, unfair, and shouldn't happen. Understandable. But illogical unless you believe in God.
Oh, here we go. Let's hear this guy's explanation for why we couldn't feel empathy for somebody else without God.
For if you do not believe in God, your subjective feelings are the only basis upon which you can object to natural suffering.
For the most part, humans are generally designed the same. And when I say designed, I mean designed by evolution. None of us want to die, none of us want to get hurt, none of us want to have something stolen from us. Thus, we don't want it to happen to anybody else. There are exceptions to every rule, and there are counterbalances. For example, do we want what they have more than we want them to not have it stolen? But the bottom line is that we can put ourselves in their shoes, and we know we would be unhappy with the situation if the roles were reversed. Sure, it's subjective, but there are similarities and patterns that we can find.
Okay, you don't like it, but how is your not liking something evidence for God not existing?
This is a straw man. He said, sure, you don't like it, but how is you not liking something evidence for God not existing? That's not the argument we're putting forward. The argument is, premise 1, God is all good and all powerful. Premise 2, such a God would not permit unnecessary suffering. 3, yet we observe unjust suffering. Conclusion, God is either not all powerful or not all good.
Think about it. It's just the opposite. Our judgments of good and evil, natural as well as human, presuppose God as the standard.
No, they do not. You made a moral judgment about God, that God is good.
If there's no God, there's neither good nor evil. There's just nature, doing what it does.
Sure, that doesn't mean that we can't say we don't like what's happening and find some way to stop it. Are you saying we should just stop trying to cure cancer? We should stop trying to prevent tsunamis and earthquakes and climate change?
If nature is all there is absolutely no need to explain why one person suffers and another doesn't. Unjust suffering is a problem only because we have a sense of what is just and unjust. But where does this sense come from? Certainly not from nature. There's nothing just about nature. Nature is only about survival.
I already explained this. Nature isn't just about survival. Nature is about optimal survival, what is best for survival. This sense does come from nature. Humans survived better in groups. If we were going to live in groups successfully without hurting or killing each other, there had to be some sense of right and wrong. The ability to build models in our minds was a major step forward. Morality has to have an end goal, and generally that end goal is what is best for the society. Sometimes this goal clashes with what's best for the individual, based on certain factors. Which is best for society, rape or no rape? Rape is best for society because it would increase the population, but in this case, what's best for the individual supersedes what's best for the society, because we wouldn't want to live in a society where we would have to worry about something like that happening to us or our families. Here's a little thought experiment. I'm sure we've all heard the trolley story. There's a trolley coming down the track. There are 5 workers on the track that will be killed if we don't pull a lever that drops a fat person off the bridge, thus stopping the trolley and saving 5 people. It's generally accepted that pulling the lever is the moral thing to do. But what about this one? You have 5 patients on operating tables that each need a different organ or they will die. There's 1 healthy person in the waiting room. Do you, as the administrator, tell the doctor to kill the healthy man to save the 5 patients? No, you don't. Because you don't want to live in a society where you might be that healthy person being killed to save the others.
What, in other words, does it mean for suffering to be unnecessary or wrong? How is that determined? Against what standard? Your private standard means nothing. My private standard means nothing. We can talk meaningfully about suffering being unnecessary or wrong only if we have an underlying belief that a standard of right and wrong objectively exists.
It's very obvious that morality is subjective, at least to some extent, based on what ISIS is doing right now. But there are underlying principles that are derived from how we want other people to act toward us. We can find ways to justify certain actions to ourselves, like, this person has way more stuff than he needs. He won't miss his TV if I take it, since I need it far more than he does. But there are clear boundaries on certain things, like killing. That's why what ISIS is doing right now is so gross and evil to us. We just can't understand how they can justify that to themselves. Killing people isn't how you build a strong society.
And if that standard really exists, that means there is a God.
I just explained, it doesn't exist.
Moreover, the believer in God has an incomparably easier time than the atheist psychologically, as well as logically, in dealing with the problem of natural suffering.
Oh, this is going to be good. All right, let's hear it.
If you accept that a good God exists, it is possible to also believe that this God somehow sets things right, if not in this world, then in the next.
Why does there have to be this imbalance? Why do things have to be set right? Why can't things just be good instead of having this supernatural scale that will eventually fix things? And don't say free will. Either we don't have free will in heaven, or we could have free will without evil. That's a cop-out answer.
For the atheist, on the other hand, no suffering is ever set right. There is no ultimate justice. The bad win and the good suffer. Earthquakes and cancers kill. End of story. Literally.
Literally? This is the literal end to an actual story? You're misusing the term literally, you dipshit. So you're telling me it's bleak for atheists and it's nothing but bliss for Christians. That's your view of it. But that's why we have to invest money in science education, so we can find cures for cancer and AIDS. So we can invent technology that will take the wind right out of a hurricane. Our goal is to improve the lives of people around us. Your goal is to make it until you die.
If nature is all there is, how can a sensitive person remain sane in a world in which tsunamis wipe out whole towns, evil men torture and murder innocent victims?
Okay, I'm out. The last 20 seconds of the video are about how to remain sensitive. I don't particularly care about being sensitive. That's a Christian thing. So fuck off, you panel van creep. If you liked this, you can subscribe to my channel. You can also follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Just click the annotations.